Hello, welcome everyone. Good day, good evening. Today we have the pleasure of hosting Juliana Smith. I'll very quickly introduce today's session and our user group, and then I leave the stage. So, who are we? We are the main Italian community focused mainly on Power BI, but more in general on business intelligence topics. We try to organize virtual meetings twice a month, and we're also organizing in-person events whenever we can. You can follow us on our social channels. We're mostly active on LinkedIn. You'll find the recording of this session on YouTube. And we also have a Telegram channel you can join. Obviously, it's mostly in Italian. We are all volunteers. We're doing volunteer work, but sometimes our activities may require some financial effort, like, for example, the software we are using to broadcast this stream right now as a license. So if you want to sustain the user group and support us, we created a GoFundMe where you can donate. Our call for speakers is always open. If you have a session you would like to present, you're always welcome to submit your session. Also, we're openly searching for people to support the user group in general. So if you don't like the idea of presenting a session live, maybe you solved a problem during work recently, you found out about an interesting feature in Power BI or anything, you're welcome to contact us on our social channels. Maybe you can record a video and we can upload it to YouTube, or anything else that comes to mind. Maybe you have the right connections to host our next in-person event. Please reach out to us on LinkedIn or on Telegram. We're always more than happy to get help. Thank you. So with that said, I leave the stage to Juliana. Juliana, thanks for being here.
Thanks a lot, and thanks everybody for joining the session. I'm still sharing my screen, aren't I? Yes.
Now you are.
Great presentation. So yes, welcome everybody to the session uncovering the secrets of dashboard design. Before we dive into the content, let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Juliana Smith. I'm from Brazil originally, but I'm based in Manchester, in the UK. My background is in physical oceanography, so I started my career in data science and ocean research. But since 2020, I have specialized in Power BI, user interface design, as well as accessible design. Currently work with project controls analytics. I also have a blog, a YouTube channel, and a GitHub where I share content on Power BI as well as accessible design. So today's session, we will see how we can design dashboards with purpose, how we can hack human perception to design better interfaces, and how we can enhance interactivity and accessibility will also enhance our engagement. So we start thinking about dashboard development, there is quite a lot of things that come to our mind. We all learn how to use Power Query. We know what's the best case we have to use. Some of us create some custom functions. So I created quite a few custom functions to help me clean the data. So Power Query is a really, really powerful transformation engine in Power BI. And we all want to learn how to use it. There are courses, we can learn M and everything. And then after we do all the transformations we have to do, we have to think about our data model. How we're going to connect the tables, what are the relationships, is this model going to support all the business, are we going to answer all the business questions, and is it going to be functional, is it going to help us to build the measures. And then we also think about DAX. We all know how DAX can be amazing and at the same time very confusing. We all know what the power of calculate and how much trouble it may cause as well. So we all spend a lot of time trying to optimize and making effective use of DAX to translate the KPIs or the metrics that we have to report on. And of course, there is performance optimization. We don't want our users to wait for like 5 minutes so the visuals are rendering after they make a selection of these slices. We want it to be quick, efficient, and not to mention the backend as well. When we are refreshing our data, we don't want to consume all the resource available. We want to make sure that it is refreshing in an optimized way. And then, of course, we all worry about data quality and data assurance. Rubbish in, rubbish out. We have to make sure that we identify what could be the sources of errors. That 107. Sorry, my phone is shouting my heart rate. So we think about, how can we enter errors in our data model? And we don't want that. We all worry a lot about getting the good data. And regardless of how many hours, how many courses we do to learn all of these stages, all these machines within Power BI, we may end up with a dashboard like this. And it's not that the values are incorrect. You may have the correct values, the correct metrics, but the way that you present your dashboards, the way that you present information is not effective. Because if you look at an interface like this, it's hard to understand what is the main message, what is the path that I should look in the screen to tell me this story. And that's why it is really, really important to design our reports with purpose. So when we talk about designing with purpose, we are talking about more than just the aesthetic. It's not only about, oh, does it look good? Purposeful design ensures that users not only see the data, but they truly understand it. And when the users understand the data, that's when they're capable of doing confident decisions. And this starts with a focus on user-centric principles. So we want to enhance clarity, usability, and impact. And that means thinking carefully how we present information. And there are some user interface design elements such as white space, alignment, hierarchy, and consistency. These are fundamental to user-centric dashboard design because they help us to guide our users' eyes to reduce cognitive load, which is the mental effort required to understand an interface, and also will make the insight more accessible. And when we improve clarity, usability, and accessibility, we empower users to engage with data more meaningfully and to make better decisions faster. So let's look into some of these user interface design elements. So first we have white space. So white space refers to the empty areas between elements, and it prevents our dashboards from feeling overwhelming. So if you ever look at a cluttered screen, so an interface full of elements, white space is the remedy, right? It gives our interface breathing room, and when we add white space, we will reduce visual noise and give the users the chance to focus on what matters most. So now if you compare the sketch on the left with the one on the right, you're going to see that there is a considerably smaller number of elements on my screen. And that is something that we have to understand. It's not because we can fit 20 different visuals on a page that we should. We need to have space between those elements. Therefore, we have to prioritize information and, if necessary, create different pages, different tabs. Next, we have alignment. So in user interface design, alignment refers to the arrangement of elements in a way that creates visual connection. So proper alignment shows that a structure and logical layout also help us to guide the users naturally through information. And the elements that line up neatly, they create a sense of order and professionalism. So you help your users to follow the flow of information. And of course, there are tools that we can use to make sure that we have our design aligned. We can use grid lines. We have to ensure if you're adding padding or spacing, those are consistent. And of course, we have to structure visuals logically. I mentioned that there are some tools. So some people like using Figma to create the backgrounds and everything. I don't use any of these. When I need to align my report, the first thing I do, I add shape. So I see what's going to be my canvas size. And I usually, if I'm using the default 16:9 that has changed now, I would use like 40 pixels around it, like the margin. So I add shapes. I literally add shapes around it, and that helps me to maintain space between my elements, and as well as follow an alignment. Don't get things misaligned. So that's something you can do very easy in Power BI. And at the end, all you have to do is remove your shapes. Now we have information hierarchy. Dashboards, they often have a lot of information, but not all the data holds equal weight. Not all the data is important. Some of them are more important. And information hierarchy is the logical structuring of the content based on its importance, relevance, or sequence. So if you think about hierarchy, a good way that you can build a hierarchy is building levels of importance. So you have your first level of importance where you're going to have less granular data. So think about your KPIs, your high level metrics. Then we have the second level of importance. That's where you can add visuals that may add some depth to your KPIs. They may explain certain behaviors. And you may also choose to have a third level of importance. That's where you're going to put more granular data. So if you have any trend and historical data, if you want to add a table, anything that's more granular, it is a good placement on the bottom of our report. So just to give an example what I'm talking about, I have here my first level of importance with my, misaligned, but it's my KPIs. I have my second level of importance. Oh, speaking about alignment, my second level of importance with the two charts in the middle that are adding some more details about my KPIs. And I also have my line chart on the bottom, which is historical data showing as well the trend. So you can build that. You may not have the three levels of importance, but this is a way you can do to prioritize information. And additionally to information hierarchy, we have visual hierarchy, which is, the title is wrong. Sorry, I have changed this presentation. I'm presenting today for the first time after changing it. But visual hierarchy is the arrangement and styling of visual elements. And that can help us to guide the viewer's attention in a specific order. And we can leverage visual hierarchy to enforce information hierarchy. So if we think about information hierarchy goal of prioritize key insights, in terms of visual hierarchy technique, we can use a larger font, bold colors, and top placement. An example is having your headline KPIs in large cards on the top of your report. If the information hierarchy goal is to group related content, the visual hierarchy technique is using consistent colors, borders, or spacing. And an example is a cluster of metrics under financials, operations, or any other discipline with matching visuals. Next, we have consistency. I'm not sure where you are based, but here in the UK, it's very common to go to a supermarket. You go to, oh, I need to buy milk, I need to buy fruit, and you go to the place where you pick up milk the last time, and there is something completely different. So the supermarkets like rearranging the shelves, they move things around. When it is a small supermarket, it's annoying. We just go around and find it. But if you're going to a large supermarket, like a warehouse, it's going to be very annoying to be walking around trying to find your milk or your fruit. Now, if that's the case, if we don't want to be walking around trying to find what we need from a supermarket, why would we do the same to our dashboard users? Why would we not be consistent? Why would you change the placement of filter slices? Why would we change the placement for, I don't know, page navigation? We shouldn't. So consistency is very important, and consistency should be applied within our layout and beyond. So let's have a look on this now. So first, our layout. We have to make sure that we have page navigation, slicer placement, title alignment, and chart order in the same position that you have across different pages in our report. So if you put your KPI cards on the top and then you change the side, or if you change the position of your slices, page navigation, or any information icon, that is going to cause confusion. Your user is going to spend a lot of time trying to understand how to use the page and less time actually making use of it. So it can be quite frustrating. Another one is consistency on visual elements, and that means the data and UI colors. So if you choose a specific colors for your actual date, if you create a new visual, you have to use the same color. If you change the color, you create some kind of dissonant. You're gonna confuse your user because they are expecting, in this case, to see actual purple where it's not. So it's gonna add a bit more of, effort to understand what's happening. It's not going to be intuitive. And the same is for iconography, typography, and iconography and spacing as well. So all your visual elements, they have to be consistent. And then we have terminology, and I must admit that I'm terrible with terminology. So I often start my my first visual and I call it month end. And at some point along the design process, I start calling it end of month. So we shouldn't do that. We should make sure that there is consistency in terminology, especially if your client or your organization, if they have some sort of naming convention, we should definitely stick to the naming convention. So you choose one. Doesn't matter, there is no right and wrong, but as long as whatever you choose, whether because you're following a naming convention or because of preferences, you're going to stick to that format. And we also have data format consistency. So the way that we format our numbers, I don't know if you're going to put the decimal comma or not. Our date, are we going to use year with 2 digits? Are we going to write the month? How are we going to do it, right? And as well as how we format currencies. Whatever you choose, whatever the reason is, whether because there is a standard that you have to follow, a client's preference, you have to stick to it throughout the page of your report and even within all the reports if you're building a suite of reports. So our reports should have a predictable behavior because that will make easier for navigation and effective use. Now let's talk about human perception, because when we have human perception and we apply those perception in our design, it makes our interfaces more intuitive and easier to understand it. So it's like you're not even making the effort to understand, to try to find the important information, because we are hacking this perception and build upon it. So first we have eye scanning patterns. So this is the natural way that we visually move across an interface. And the interface can be a screen, it can be a book, it can be anything that we're trying to read content. And that is how we move across that interface to find and understand information. And we usually scan into different patterns. We have the F pattern. The F pattern, it happens a lot. When you're reading text-heavy interfaces, so a blog post, for example, or a book, we have the Z-scanning pattern, that it's usually very much what we do when we are looking to information hierarchy, to data hierarchy, which is the case of our report. So when we build our reports, we always have an entry to the page, which should be the page title. So if you think in Western countries, we read from the left to the right, from the top to the bottom. And we have the page exit. So if we place the most important information on these paths, we will naturally highlight them, and our users will see them without making much effort. There is just one thing that I don't recommend. Although we have a line here on the exit on the bottom of the page, I would not recommend adding, for example, slices or any information that we expect to interact before we actually look into the visual. So I have missed before it was a data visualization challenge. I missed these slices completely because the person put these slices on the bottom of the page. We expect to make our slices selection before, so don't put on the bottom of the page anything that is crucial to understand what your report is about. And then we have Gestalt principles. So Gestalt psychology is from the 1920s, and it's based on the idea that people perceive visual elements as unified wholes rather than individual parts. And this principle taps into the way that our brains naturally organize visual information. And if we do make use of Gestalt principles, we will naturally design dashboards that are more intuitive. So we'll be able to guide our users' attentions and make complex data easier to digest. So let's start with the first example, which is figure ground. So this explains how we naturally separate visual elements into a main focus, which is the figure, and the background. And that helps them to quickly identify what is important. So in this example that I have here, I created, if you create a strong contrast between key visuals, key elements, and the background, you're gonna highlight that as something important, and your user's eyes will be drawn straight away to that. And this is the example that I put here, my KPI cars. They're in bold, they're in large cars in a darker color. It stands out against the background. And this is one way that the figure ground can be used. And if you look now to my line chart here, I have a solid line, which our brain prioritizes over the dash line. And the color also has got higher contrast against the background. And that's exactly what I want. I want to draw attention to the blue line because this is the actual value and the other one is the forecast. Next, we have grouping by similarity. So elements that share visual attributes such as shape, color, orientation, we perceive them as belonging together. That's how our users quickly recognize patterns and relationships. So I have here an example, and there are quite a few things here. So I start with my KPI cards. So they're all placed on the top and they share the same style. So I'm grouping them by similarity. Then I have a consistent color coding across my visuals. So whatever it is forecast, whatever is actual, they share the same color. So I'm now grouping by color. And I also have here my slicers that are grouped through shared formatting as well as where they are placed. And even if you look to how I use different colors to group them, I am also making use of grouping by similarity. Next, I have grouping by proximity. So we naturally perceive elements that are placed close together as part of the same group, even if they look different. And these help us to help our users to understand which visuals or data points are related if we place those elements near each other. And it also makes the layout more intuitive and reduce the need for extra labels or explanations. So if I go back to my report page, there is my KPIs on the top. There is no border, there is nothing. What I'm using here is I'm grouping, I'm putting the previous value close to the main metric, and I'm using white space in between. So because we're a group, you're using white space and putting words similar together, we don't need to add a border. We don't need to say progress previous month. It is easier. It is quite intuitive to understand that those values are related. And then we have grouping by enclosure. So we perceive elements as related when they are visually enclosed within a boundary. And this is the principle that our brain prioritizes over all the others. And this happens even if the elements are not similar, if they're not very close together. You put a border, our brain will prioritize that. And that helps the users to quickly identify related content by placing it within a shared visual container. And here is my example. So now I put a border around my KPI card. I don't have to, but if you want to make sure that it's evident, you put a border around it or a shading behind it, something that makes them visually appear that is inside a container, a shared container. Next, we have interactivity and accessibility. So instead of just presenting a one-size-fits-all view, interactive elements allow our users to uncover insights that are most relevant for them. So, for example, I often work with program management, and within that program, there are different projects, and these different projects have different project managers. And when I create a report that it is program level and you can drill through each one of the projects, they may not want to know about what happened to project A and project B. They just want to know about project C, that the one that they are responsible for. So when we give the option for them to just filter based on what is relevant for them, that will drive engagement. And accessibility, it is a critical factor in ensuring that the insights are available for everyone, including for those users with disabilities. So in terms of interactivity, that will help to increase dashboard engagement because allow your users to explore the data dynamically, and that makes the experience feel more personalized. How can we increase interactivity? We have filters and slices, so it means for the users it is your choice. You can segment the data, filter the data the way it is relevant for you. We also have tooltips. So tooltips, when you hover over and you have that box that may add additional information, it can be context, it can be an observation, a limitation on the data, anything. And that is a very, very powerful way to add context without adding clutter, because you're not adding text box across your screen. You're using the hover over option. Although tooltips are powerful for that reason, we also have to be very careful because they're not compatible with screen readers. So if you add a button, an icon, anything that it's gonna you're gonna build the hover over effect, you have to add alternative text as well with the same information, so nobody lose important information. And then we have drill through. So drill throughs means go deeper. It is a very, it's a very good way to build your storytelling depth, as well as not adding too many elements on your screen. So you can see the high level and you can choose to drill through and have a view of a more granular data. There is just one observation that I like to make about drill throughs is as developers, we know what a drill through is. We know how to drill through. Our users are very much unlikely that they never used Power BI before. They don't understand. They don't even know what drill through mean. So I'm favored to make these evident what to do. So click here for drill through. put a button, put instructions, tell them what it means, so they don't miss that kind of interaction. And of course, whatever interaction we're going to put, whether we're going to put slices, hover over, page navigation, we have to ensure that they are placed in an intuitive way for a seamless experience. You're not going to put a slicer, as I said, at the bottom of the page. You're not expecting to interact with their slicer on the bottom of the page. So you have to think through, and you have to make sure if you have links to other pages or to other reports, you also have to make sure that you can it's going to the right place. You click the link works. And this is very important as well if you're making use of bookmarks. Bookmarks, they are quite interesting. I like using bookmarks, but they can be very annoying, because the way that you bookmark, whatever the selection your slices, it will keep that. So if you need to change the month every month because it's the reporting month, it will stick to it. You're going to have to every month refresh it. So be careful when making use of bookmarks. So we have to make sure, this is very important, that whatever interactive elements we're going to use, we have to help our users to quickly find and act the insights that they need. They also have to, it has to be obvious how to use these interactive elements. But there is something that is also very important. Watch out for your audience. Not everybody likes to explore the data. I once had a client who told me, I want no more than 2 clicks on the mouse to see the data that I need. So my KPI was 2 clicks on the mouse. Some people don't need to filter to see the whys, they just want to see a high level metric. So if you, as senior the person is, if you have to create a report for a very senior leadership, you're not going to add all these interactive elements because they're very likely they will not want to see. So make sure that if you add interactivity elements, it suits your audience. It's not because you think it's going to look nice, it has to suit our audience. We don't design for ourselves, we design for an audience. Next, we have accessibility. So globally, there are over 1 billion people with some form of disabilities. We should always try to cater for those as well. We need to make sure that everybody has access to information and services. And that means as well how we build our dashboards. There are a few things that are very easy to address without having to do like a course in accessibility. The first of them is supporting keyboard navigation. So not everybody relies on a mouse. That could be for preference or that can be for a disability. Some people would only use the keyboard. And for that reason, we have to make sure that the tab order is set correctly, because Power BI is compatible with keyboard navigation by default. A tab order will define how they will experience that report. So you may have an amazing report, but if the tab order is something like this, it can be very frustrating. So tab order is the order that when you navigate your page by only using the tab key, and we have to manually check if it is matching the intended way that our user is expected to consume the report. So remember, we read from the left to the right, from the top to the bottom. This is how it should be. We should first, what is the first element on the top left? It's our page title. Then I have here my page navigation. I have go after selecting the page. I have my slices. I have my KPI, my information button. I have my KPI card. I have here this donut chart with my budget spending, and I have a card inside it. I have now my final chart, which is this line chart. And if you look closely, there is a shape. So this shape on the top, this is a navy one. It is an actual shape. I didn't create a special background for it. That's very important that we hide that because we don't want to navigate through the shapes, especially if you use a lot of shapes. Hide them on the tab order. So it's very important because under the selection pane, you have layer order and tab order. Layer order is something else. Layer order is how each element stack on the top of each other. which is not what we want. We want tab order, which is the order that we navigate the elements on the page by using the tab key. If you're not sure how to set your tab order, sorry, I should have mentioned before, I have a video on YouTube that shows very briefly how to set up. It's very simple. You pretty much just click on the element and use the arrows up and down to move it to the right position. So next, I have alternative text. So some people rely on screen readers to consume information, and Power BI is compatible by default with screen readers, which is great. But there is a massive effort that as developers we have to make to ensure that screen readers work as they're supposed to, which is creating alternative text. So all the non-text elements, we have to add a description about what is the information, what is the insight that is being conveyed by it. Now, there are different ways. So all native visuals, they will have a box where you can type in the alternative text, and that allows you to type in 250 characters. And that also has a downside that every time if you have slices, you change the slicer selection, your alternative text will not, it was not going to follow that. It's going to stay static. And the other issue you have is every time that you need to refresh your data, you may have to come back to change alternative text. How can we make it more dynamic? Power BI also allows us to use conditional formatting alternative text. So we can create measures like this one that I have created. So I use these, it's a monthly precipitation matrix. Which is a very complex data visualization. It's not about translating the pixels. It's not about telling every data point that is in there. When we build the alternative text, is about what is the insight. And that often depends on your users. So for me, it was very easy to create alternative text for this precipitation because my background is in oceanography. I had to learn about it. But if we are reporting in an area that we don't have any domain knowledge, we need to understand who relies on the screen readers, who the alternative text is for, how they prefer to consume, what kind of insights they need. We need to tailor that to our users. I have also done some experiments with UDFs. I created some, they are available on my GitHub if you want to experiment. There are some parts they are repeatable across different reports, but it's very, very difficult to create one solution fits all. Oh, and when we use DAX to create our alternative DAX, there is no limitation in the number of characters. Next, we have color contrast. More and more often, I can see on LinkedIn, I'm scrolling through like data visualization challenge, and I have this kind of color contrast. So I have a really light background with really light colors for text and the colors to build the data visualizations. Or I have the opposite, really dark background with really dark colors on the top of that. And that it's bad for many reasons, not only for accessibility. If you have people with visual impairments, it's going to make it very difficult to understand your report. But you also have people who the screen might be too bright, the environment might have bad lighting. All these environmental factors will also impact in how your user consume that information. And to make sure that we have a good enough color contrast ratio, we can use the WCAG, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines thresholds. So if we aim for the level of compliance AA, all the text, that is body text, which is up to 17 points, or if in bold, up to 13 points, we should have a color contrast ratio of 4.5 to 1. Non-text contrast, so the colors that we choose for our icons, and for the data visualizations, they also need to have contrast, and that should be at least 3 to 1. So we're looking to have something like this. We need to see we have contrast. It works better for everybody. And if you're not entirely sure how to check your color contrast ratio, I also have a video on YouTube. There I show how to use it is the Adobe accessibility tools, where you can check the color contrast ratio, and you can also run a color blindness simulation. So there are colors that used together, they may cause issues for those who have some form of color blindness. Then next, I have font size. It is very tempting to use very small font size. I think Power BI allows us to use, I can't remember if it's 8 or 9, the minimum size. And it's very tempting, especially when we're talking about data labels, axes, values. But that's not great. Not only, again, it's not only for disabilities, it is, of course, but imagine that that person may be consuming your report from a smaller screen. They may not have your 27-inch monitor. They may have, I don't know, a 13-inch laptop, a smartphone, or a tablet. And it's going to be very difficult. They're going to squint a lot their eyes to be able to read your report. That can cause a lot of frustration. So we should design using larger font size. But what is a large font size? I used to, if you use the default canvas size, the old default one, which if you get the proportion 16 by 9, this was the canvas size, 1280 by 720 pixels. On that size, I use that as my baseline. My minimum font size there is 12 points. But with the new canvas size, you also, which means that you can have larger canvas size, you have to increase your minimum font size. And I actually posted today on my blog a guide on how you can calculate a minimum font size by using these default of 12 points for the 1280 by 720 pixels screen. So depending on your font size, on your canvas size, you're going to have to increase your font size proportionally. So dashboards are more than just data displays. And by designing with intention, we shape how users will interact with information, creating clarity and focus. Leveraging how we naturally perceive visuals let us lead our audience effortlessly. We're going to connect them to the insights they need without making them put a lot of mental effort to find their insight. And a very good way to think about improving your design is by using the CRAP framework, which means we have C for contrast. So ensure that the key elements stand out, have enough color contrast. R for repetition, so it reinforces consistency, helping users to navigate and understand content more intuitively. And then we have A for alignment, that we create a logical flow, reducing cognitive load and improving readability, especially for screen reader users. And then P we have for proximity, group related items together, making relationships between elements clearer and enhancing comprehension. So say less, show less, say more, and you leave no room for noise, just meaningful impact. So let's move from design fails to design wins. Thank you very much. Is there any question?
Yes, there was a question by Emma. They asked how to avoid incorrect assumptions when the grouping by proximity is necessary. E.g., you have two metrics that were requested on the same page, I guess, but they are not related.
Sometimes the metrics, they're not related, right? But if you need to compare, I don't know, I would need a bit more context to understand. Do you need to compare them? But if they're not, they are you will have some level of proximity in your report because you're not going to put things completely apart. But when we make use of white space, so that's why white space is very important. You kind of separate blocks of information, and it's easier to understand, even though that they may be close enough, but there is a boundary. I don't know how you're going to display that. If it is using colors, of course, you're going to select different colors for them. If it is on a card, you're going to label them, right? So when we have our KPIs cards, for example, they are close enough, but you put a label on them. And then by the label, you will actually understand that they're separate. So it's very difficult to answer this question because I don't know exactly the context. Is it what kind of how you're going to show that information? There is no one answer fits all. Very often we have metrics that are close but not too close. So white space for me is very important to separate elements in your report.
Thanks. Okay, let's wait 1 more minute to see if there are more questions. In the meantime, I wanted to say it was very interesting to see the explanation of the alt text feature. Honestly, I've never studied it in depth, and I've never thought of the applications that the DAX function could have on the alternate text. That was a very nice example.
To be honest, it's a rabbit hole. As soon as you start looking to these alternative texts, there are really nice resources for us to think about it. But at the same time, it has to be tailored. It shouldn't be our view on the inside. So that's why it's so difficult to create meaningful alternative texts. But yes, UGFs are really good to help you. So, for example, I created a UGF for the context, right? Do you have a reporting month? What is the slices selection? So I try to put that now as a hover over my reports, right? If people, when you have like slices that allow multiple selection and only shows multiple selected, that's not very intuitive. So I now use similar thought process even when I'm not making use of alternative text.
Well, it seems there are no more questions. I think the explanations were very clear. So yeah, I guess we can wrap it up. Thank you very much, Juliana, for coming, presenting your session. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you very much for having me. Thanks everybody for joining, and have a nice evening.
Thanks everyone for attending. We'll see you at the next event. Goodbye.